You are listening to the Choose Your Struggle podcast, a member of the Shameless Podcast Network. This week on the Choose Your Struggle podcast, it's coach and former sex worker Heather Wylde Smith. But first, Kid Mental, let's go.
Things ain't always gonna go our way, but you can always win when you choose your struggle. And some battles will be yesterday, but today is for a new beginning. Choose your struggle, and don't worry about what they say, but you can always win when you choose your struggle. And you can bounce back just as Jay. Come on and listen to Choose Your Struggle. Whoa, choose your struggles. Choose your struggle. Whoa, choose your struggle.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Choose Your Struggle podcast. So great to be back with you all. Before I get into the podcast for this week, quick shout out, quick announcement. If you listened all the way to the end last week, and by the way, thank you. That's one of those numbers that I see sometimes when I'm checking how things are going on the back end. And I think my completion rate is like 80-something%, which is super high for podcasts. So that means you love me. You really love me, as Sally Fields said. I think it was Sally Fields. So for those of you who didn't, or if you heard it but didn't really register, the birthday fundraiser is live. Now, for those of you who have been listening for a year now, last year's birthday fundraiser raised over over $12,000 for the Drug Policy Alliance. And because of that, we were able to get Kellen Roosian-Yellow on the show, who talked about all that Drug Policy Alliance does with that kind of funds, or all their funding and all the work they're doing. So thank you so much to everybody who did that last year. This year, we are setting a bit more of a bit more easy to hit target. We'll say it that way. Drug Policy Alliance is a big national organization. Obviously, something it's really easy to support because you see the results in your neighborhood, in your city. This year, I am raising funds for an organization called Savage Sisters. Now, for those of you who may have heard this, I've talked about this before, or heard me, or saw me talk about this on social media. I joined the board for this organization about a month ago. I reached out to the founder, Sarah Laurel, before I even moved to Philly, to say, I'm really impressed with your work, would love to get connected. She was very, very kind and welcoming for that. We become friends, and she invited me to join the board. What Savage Sisters does is they have multiple recovery houses here in Philadelphia. We have 4 right now. We're about to open the 5th with a 6th on the way. And these are places for people who are fresh out of treatment to come and sort of, live while they get back on their feet, which is truly important and incredible, and a piece of the recovery journey that does not get talked about enough. We also, I should say, as a board member, do harm reduction outreach. We go to neighborhoods around Philadelphia, mostly in North Philly, and we give out things like food and clothing, like clean rigs, like Narcan, which is obviously, as you all know, very important to me. And we clean up trash as we go. And these outreach events happen once a week, and then a bonus event every 3rd Saturday of the month. These are, if you ever want to see sort of good work have an impact, these sorts of events. I've done a couple of them now, and they're super important. I mean, it's when you do it, you cannot understand without doing it. And I just have fallen in love with the incredible work of this organization. So I am setting that goal at $2,500 for this fundraiser, and that is because as with last year, I am going to match all the donations. So let's get to that amount. And let's make, for an organization this small, and it is, they're only a couple years old, that is changed. That's important money. That is real important money. So last week, your good egg was to share the fundraiser. That's obviously not a good egg this week, but if you see it on social media, please do it. It is also in the show notes of this episode, and you can learn more by going to the website, which is also in the show notes of this episode. Or please reach out if you want to know more. If you live in the Philly area and want to get involved, or just if this resonates with you, and you want to be connected to Sarah, she is always down to chat and tell people about the organization. Please reach out. I would love to talk to you about Savage. And thank you to the people who've already donated. I'm recording this on Wednesday. What is today? The 30th of June, and we're closing in on $500. So thank you to those who have already done that. Obviously super important to me. So that is the fundraiser. Obviously, you're going to hear about that for the next couple of weeks. My birthday is the 10th, so you'll hear about that at least once more, if not twice more. This week's episode. You saw her if you watched A Day in the Life a couple weeks ago. Her name is Heather Wylde Smith. She is a coach, but she is also a former sex worker. She says in this episode, or I say, that you will have heard her story by now because it has gone out as a bonus episode of the podcast. That isn't true. I wasn't able to fit that in the schedule yet. It'll probably be in a couple of weeks. Definitely go watch it though. It'll be great to hear it. Don't get me wrong. It's going to be a really fantastic episode. But there was something special about that event. Now, for those of you keeping track at home, I have not done A Day in the Life since hers. The next one is going to be next week, which is July, what is that, the 8th, 7th, something like that. Next Wednesday. It'll be a solo event. It's just me telling a story. I had planned to take a couple weeks off, or about a month off, because they're every 2 weeks. So I was going to skip a couple of events after Heather anyways. And then she was so good that I was like, I'm really glad I'm already doing this, because this is going to be the best one for a long time. For those of you who missed it, a little bit of context. It was Heather telling stories about her time as a sex worker. It also included her faking not one, but 2 orgasms on the show. So definitely go check it out. Not one to watch with the kids, if that's a thing you do, unless that's something you're cool with. And then props to you for being a very progressive parent. But definitely go check it out. You can find it on my Facebook, on my YouTube, and my Twitter. For full context, starting next week, Day in the Life, Rock Bottom Storytellers, all these live events will no longer be going live on Twitter. I finally, after almost a year of lobbying, was able to get LinkedIn live. And so they will be going live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Very excited about that. Now, as always, would not be an episode of this podcast without mentioning audio quality. Most of the time, it's me being nitpicky. It's just me going, yeah, okay, I want it to be a little better. Not this week. So this one's my fault. I apologize. I am almost unlistenable on this episode. Heather sounds great, which is always more important. What happened was I had my audio settings still turned to the settings for live events. And this is way more information than you need, but it's much louder because I stand farther back. Obviously, it's video. You want to see me. But for the podcast, I then take a step in, and I'm right in front of the microphone as I am right now. I sound like I'm screaming at you the entire episode. And so because of that, I had to turn the audio way down so I wouldn't blow out your eardrums. And I just don't sound good. Flat out, it's not good. So my apologies on that. I almost didn't play this because I was like, wow, I sound that bad. But Heather did such a tremendous job on this interview that it would not be fair to her to not have this go live. And whenever you try to re-record things, as someone who has done this multiple times now, not on my show, I've never had people re-record, but multiple times I've given an interview. The person then contacted me and said, hey, something got screwed up or whatever the case is. Can we redo it? And it's never as good. There's something about the off the cuff quality of an initial interview that's just better. So not fair to Heather if I didn't put this out, but my apologies on the sound quality. All right, without further ado, enjoy this conversation with Heather Wylde Smith and stick around till the end for your card and your good egg. Enjoying the podcast? Consider supporting it on Patreon. You'll get behind-the-scenes looks, sneak peeks, extra bonus content, and best of all,
a way to interact with me, your host. You'll also get discounts on merch like tank tops and magnets and all the other services I provide, like booking me to speak, coach or consult, or even advertise here on the podcast. Check it out in the show notes or in patreon.com/chooseyourstruggle. Plans start at as little as $3.40 a month, and all the money goes right into the podcast. All right, let's get back to the show.
Choose your struggle. Choose your struggle.
Thanks for sharing the podcast with your friends. If you're listening on Apple, please rate and review, or check out the review link in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jay, for having me on. I am Heather Wylde Smith. I'm a transformational business coach for ambitious, conscious entrepreneurs who want to make bank, but only if they're able to serve their clients with integrity.
That was wow. Your elevator pitch is right on. I am impressed.
Thank you. Thank you. I am also a former sex worker, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
What? I didn't know that.
I know. I just snuck up on you with that. You thought we were going to have a nice, clean conversation.
You know, I think that the thing that needs to be said before we get into this is that if you have not gone and listened to Heather's A Day in the Life yet, which by the time this comes out will have been a Monday Motivation episode, so you have no reason to have missed it so far. But I will say with Heather's, if you have a chance to go on Facebook, YouTube, or it was on Twitter, to watch it, do yourself a favor and do it. It was so good that I was really glad that I was taking a break from A Day in the Life afterwards. And I don't want to spoil it, but I will say multiple times Heather has a fake orgasm. So I think that's all I need to say to get you to go check out Heather's interview. It wasn't just once, it was literally twice. So you should definitely go do that. But for real, this is going to be a different interview today because normally, you guys know the arc of how these shows normally go. This one's going to be different because we're going to spend a lot more time actually talking about Heather's story. As some of you know, because I've talked with some of you in person, that it's been a quest of mine for a long time to have someone who can actually talk intelligently from experience about sex work on this podcast, and that day is today. So I'm very delighted to have Heather joining us. She has been so kind to be very open with her story. She was that on A Day in the Life to a T, and we've talked now multiple times. She is very forthright and patient with people who have questions, myself obviously included. So I think, Heather, where we're going to start this, because as you know, this is something you and I have talked about now multiple times. There are a lot of people who get into sex work for not great reasons. That's just a fact. But the thing is, a lot of people seem to think that everybody gets into sex work that way. And as your story illustrates, that could not be farther from the truth.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely in my time knew people that had been brought into the industry by pimps. Nobody lied to them about it, though. They got into it. They knew what they were getting into, at least ostensibly. You can't really know until you're there. But yeah, I in 16 years of it being my primary income, I never came across a single person who was tricked into the industry. And I met a lot of people. So definitely everybody has their own stories about how they came into the industry. My story is pretty unique because I think everybody I knew, they had an in. They had somebody that they knew that was already doing it. And I just kind of jumped in feet first on my own.
So actually, question about that's a great point, because obviously I've heard your story before, but like, there's a difference between sort of being like, oh, that looks interesting, to no, straight up, I'm going to do that, right? I mean, that is, I think a lot of things are interesting. I have not tried them, but I think that they're very interesting. So I guess that would be the question of, as you tell your intro story, be a little frank about how you had the balls to try this for the first time.
Depression helped. I'll say that. So as I talked about on A Day in the Life, is that actually I was already sexually active. I was sexually actually active at 14, and I really liked sex. And then I went to see Pretty Woman, and I was like, how cool is that? Like, sex and money. I mean, that just sounds like fun. At the beginning of the movie, I'm just like, wow, that looks like an adventure. And you have to understand, and I explained this in the other thing, was that I grew up in a very small town. I was pretty sheltered. It was very boring. I knew that I did not belong there at a very young age. There were racial tensions. It was like, I don't belong here. This place is fucking crazy. Please get me out. And so I really connected with Vivian in the movie, because she's actually, the actress is from Smyrna, Georgia, near Atlanta, but they made her say she was from Macon, Georgia. So that kind of clicked. I was like, hey, she's a Georgia girl. And at the part in the movie where he's saying that he'll put her up in a condo and, just basically wants to get her off the street, but he's not going to be in a relationship with her. And she says that she wants the fairy tale. At 15 years old, having never had contact, any known contact, I may have been, this is the funny thing, like, sex workers don't go to like a special grocery store. They go to the same damn grocery stores as you do. So you have met sex workers, you just didn't know, okay? Yeah, so I had never knowingly met any sex workers. And but I was fascinated by it. And when he's saying that he won't give her the fairy tale, he'll just give her this practical thing, I was like, bitch, go for it. Like, get the condo. You got like a new wardrobe. He's going to give you some money. He said he'll arrange for transportation. I'm like, girl, get some better tricks. And so it was in the back of my mind. I was really, really fascinated by it. And there was a movie called, I want to say it was called like Angel or something. And it was this awful like B or C grade movie. And it was about this honor student who was like in high school, but she was a streetwalker at night. And she was like supporting her and like her little brother or something. I don't know. I was a straight A student. So I was like, see, straight A students can be hookers too. I lived my whole life through movies. So, but I never thought I would do it because I was smart. I was good in school. I came from a good family, and I didn't think I was pretty enough. Like, I was very, very tomboyish, and I was always praised for my brain and never for my looks. So I thought, well, that's not really open to me. But I was very fascinated by it, and I earned 2 academic scholarships and went to college. And they kept asking me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I was like, I don't want to grow up.
No. That's not an answer you hear to that question that often. What do you want to be when you grow up? Not grown up. I want to stay this age.
Well, and it's not even so much about the age, it's the mindset. Like, all the adults in my life made being an adult look very boring. So I kept looking at things, and I love to learn, but I hate institutionalized learning. And my family kind of went fucking crazy. I mentioned depression earlier. So my family went fucking nuts my first year of college. And by the second year, it was very difficult for me to go to class and keep my grades up and everything. And at the end, the summer after my second year of college, we'll back up. So one of my friends met my family. One of my college friends met my family, and he was like, Heather, your family needs to be bombed. And I was like, what? He's like, no, seriously, your family needs to be bombed. He's like, you don't need to go back home. And I'm like, okay, I don't really see that it's that serious. But at any rate, things had taken a turn for the worse. My parents had split up, which was a good thing, but then madness ensued. And I was really, really depressed. And then the summer after my second year of college, the family situation got more fucking insane. And at that point, I was like, okay, I kind of don't care what they think anymore. Before it was like, I don't want to disappoint my family, but then, like this madness ensues and I'm like, I don't know if I care so much, about what they think. And I was in Atlanta, which was like an hour from where I grew up. And I decided I would go for it, So I went to get a stripper's permit and...
Time out. So, listeners, that's going to happen a lot during Heather's story because that happened a lot during a day in the life where I was just like, hold up, that's a thing? So, quickly... because the analogy I'm kind of getting here is like when I was little, I was like, I'm going to be a baseball player, even though people were like, you're probably not going to be a baseball player. And I worked my ass off until I realized I can't be a baseball player. You, on the other hand, were like, screw you, I'm going to do this. And it sounds like you said your story included a stripper's permit. So strippers have to get a permit. That's a thing the strippers need.
Yes, in Georgia, at least. You have to buy a permit. And back in 1996, it was $47. Now it had gone up to as high as like $350 per club per year. And they do a background check. They fingerprint you. They do a background check on you. And if you pass that, then you get your permit. So it's kind of like getting a liquor permit to serve alcohol if you're a server or a bartender. Only way more expensive because you're showing your pussy. I just know that like anytime you've got an adult business, like they always find ways to tax you harder, So I had to go get this permit, and the line was around the block because every stripper in the world had come to Atlanta thinking that they were going to make all this money off the Olympics. And I don't do mornings. I'm just now becoming a morning person now, and it's interesting, but so I showed up kind of late. The line was around the block. They stopped giving out permits before I was able to get up. And this awful girl in front of me could tell like that I was just country and like green as all get out. And she was like, well, they're not giving out permits anymore, but they're going to give them out tomorrow because there's such a big line. Well, the next day was Saturday. So that Saturday morning, I get up and I got up at like, 30 for me. And I get down to the police station at like 7 a.m. And I'm sitting on the outside, like I'm the first person there, and like nobody else shows up and nobody else shows up and nobody else shows up. And finally a cop comes out and he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm here to get my dancer's permit. He's like, we don't give permits on Saturday. But they felt sorry for me. And so they brought me in, they fingerprinted me, and they're giving me the permit. Well, Atlanta was woefully understaffed for police, and the fucking Olympics were coming. And they were trying to talk me into becoming a cop. And I actually said to them, I said, look, I think I have a lot less chance of getting shot working as a stripper than I would as a cop. I mean, so they gave me the permit. I go back to the club and they take the permit. And the second night, not the first night, but the second night I was there, I get called into the back office. And the manager's like, he's like, sit down. And I'm like, okay, what the fuck? And he's like, are you a cop? And I said, no. And he said, are you a cop? And I said, no, I'm a broke college student. And he said, you have now told me that you are not a police officer, so any evidence that you gather is now null and void. And I was like, what part of broke college student do you not understand, right? But because I got a permit on Saturday, they thought I was a cop.
So you go to the club, and I guess what my question from what you're saying is it true, the rumors that a lot of strippers are also, escorts or into sex work, that you just have to know how to ask?
I think it depends on the girl. Usually strippers strip and hookers hook. And there's not a lot of crossover. Like we may start off in one area and like migrate to another, but overall, like I hated stripping. It's like being it's like being trapped in a middle school with a bunch of middle school acting girls who are also drinking and on drugs. and will like steal your thong just to spite you. Like, it's just madness. It's just
I've never had that happen to me. I can't commiserate. I can empathize, but I've never had my thong stolen by a drunk stripper. So okay, so if that's not the case, you start as a stripper, but you have a goal in mind, and it's not stripping.
Yeah, so it was me being, you know, an egghead, like, and being just very methodical about this. Let's go do this thing that's legal first, you know. Let's go do this thing. It's like I went for the training wheels first, you know.
That's fair. I want to pause and say that I really appreciate the hard work you put in. Like no joke, right? You put a lot of work into doing this. This isn't, I think when people think about sex work, they're like, oh, they just, you know, go do it. Like, no, you're proving that, like, you put a lot of work into following this dream.
Well, I did actually. And it's, you know, it's, if I had had an in, it would have been a lot different, you know? But I didn't have an in, you know? So I stayed like the third night of the stripping thing, and I hated it. You know, it was just miserable. And, but I'd heard another girl talk about Jack Shacks, and I was like, ooh, what's a Jack Shack? And so Jack Shack is the colloquial term for a lingerie modeling shop. And, you know, ostensibly it's like going into the VIP room at a strip club. Instead of there being girls dancing everywhere, you're just going into a room with a girl. And a lot of hand jobs happen there. You know, most of those girls at least claim to not do anything more than like hand jobs. But I'm sure, you know, some of them did. And I'm sitting in this place, and I worked there for about 2 months, and it was crazy. It was like, it was this guy named Big Ed, and he would like wave his gun out the window into the parking lot, because the street hookers outside would come to our parking lot and try to like steal our tricks. And we'd be watching TV. We're watching the Olympics, you know, and you hear Big Ed, get the fuck out of my parking lot, you skanky hose, man. It's a miracle that I survived my first
and
years.
At this time, you're how old were you? 20, like 19, 20?
I was 20. I was about to turn 21, and I'm sitting over in the corner, and like all these girls hated me, and they're, you know, talking like whatever they're talking, but I would listen to them, right? And this one girl, I'm always tempted to do this Valley Girl voice when I'm imitating her, but she was not a Valley Girl. But she was like, we're better than strippers because we only dance when we get paid to. And we're better than escorts because we don't fuck. And I was like, yeah, but escorts make more money. You know?
So you, but even more than that, you just like, you weren't there for the judgment. You weren't there for the stigma. You were there because you were following this dream, and you were in the minor leagues, but you were working on making it to the majors.
Well, one way of looking at it, it was just like, you know, sex work, especially in the beginning, was more about the adventure than it was the money. And, you know, I was very depressed, you know, by this point. I was on medication. I was seeing a therapist. But, you know, my life was just, the life as I knew it was just falling apart around me. And it was awful. And I think I was a little suicidal, honestly. I was just like, I'm going to go have this adventure. And if I get killed while I'm there, so what?
Well, I'm glad that you got to have the adventure without being killed. That's good.
It is. Yeah. So I stayed at that place for a couple months, and I really wasn't making a lot of money, and it wasn't in a great part of town. I didn't know the city, so I didn't know that this was a bad part of town when I started working there. And like I said, every hooker had come from like all over the country and the planet to work the Olympics. And so everywhere was like full up, and like I wasn't very pretty. I didn't know how to make myself cute. I didn't know how to dress, you know. So I was basically just being hired because I was white and I was young, you know. I was baby face. Like I could have passed for 18 easily, you know, even though I was 20. Not that's a huge age difference, but anyway. Yeah. So finally, you were talking about how does one find these things. So and I was telling you that you found us in the Yellow Pages back then.
Yeah, that was so fascinating. I mentioned this actually. So for those who have yet to watch her Day in the Life, I mentioned how in 1996, I mean, I was 10, but if I had been an adult, I don't know that I would know how to find someone work. Today, it's like the internet, right? I mean, the internet wasn't really as popular. And my wife afterwards was like, that was a bunch of bullshit. You didn't know how to find a hooker. I was like, okay. I don't know if you mean that as like a compliment, but it's just like, you were lying. That was a lie. Okay. So anyway, back to your story. So you're doing this for a couple of months, but you decided to kick it up a notch.
Yeah. So, I learned a couple things. I learned about tip hustling. I learned about, you go in for one price and then you explain to people, hey, it's going to be more if you want to do this, that, and the other thing. And so I picked up like a little bit of game. And, I was doing it the hard way because like if you're with a pimp, he teaches you. If he has other women working for him, those are your wife-in-laws and they teach you. And I didn't have any of this. And like I said, I was working in this place where I was like the odd man out, like they did not like me. And so everything I was learning, I was just kind of like picking up from, listening to them to talk about what they did, with their clients. So I didn't know about the Yellow Pages yet, but there was a publication in Atlanta where it was like a giant, like an oversized, it was a twofold newspaper instead of being like, fourfold, but it was pretty big. And we would had all the adult stores and, the strip clubs had, their ads and, everything. And I was looking through it and I was like, how am I going to choose? How am I going to choose? Like, who am I going to call? And I finally decided I was going to call this ad that said Girl Casino, because they had a full page color ad. And I was like, okay, that had to be expensive, so if they're paying for full page color ads, they've got to be doing something. And I was right. They were actually the longest running, biggest agency in Atlanta. And so I called them up and got an interview. And I went to this interview and I was so book smart, but I had no common sense. And I definitely I was just starting to learn about any kind of criminal knowledge. And so I go to this interview and it was in the parking lot of a Kinko's. Because
like you were just, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, it was in the parking lot of a Kinko's because Kinko's was 24 hours. So you would meet them in places that were 24 hours so it didn't draw attention to like, why are all these people milling around in this parking lot?
I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Right. And so most of the agencies didn't want people to actually know where the office was because they didn't want to get robbed, So, and this agency at this point was probably doing, having girls go to at least 30 clients a night. So, I mean, that's $3,000. If each girl only stayed an hour, that was over $3,000 that they would have in cash, and you don't want to put stuff in the bank because then you're on the hook with the IRS about it. So, so I meet up with this guy in this parking lot and he's a young guy. He's like, maybe 25 at the time, fucking beautiful. Oh my God, he was so beautiful. Did not realize he was the boyfriend of the manager. But I show up in like jeans, a t-shirt, my short hair because it was growing out from a buzz cut because I was like college lesbian, and no makeup on. And the guy's like, I'm, filling out the paperwork and everything. And he's like, do you know what this is? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, okay. And so, filled out all my paperwork and everything and, explained, how the beeper codes, and like who to call and what to do and blah, 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 blah. And I drove back to the condo that I was house sitting for. And as soon as my tires touched the pavement of the parking lot, my beeper went off for the first time. And I saw 5 clients that night and I didn't have sex with a single one of them. And yeah, because I had picked up enough hustle to be like, yeah, you got to give me more money. And so I was in love. I was like, I made $500 and I didn't even have to have sex. Like, this is pretty cool. I'm not sitting in an office. Nobody's breathing down my neck. I just like call these people and let them know where I am. And, so it was fine. And then the second night, the first guy that I went to, he hustled me. And he was like, you're not really my type, but if you'll tell the agency you left, I'll keep you, and like, I'll just give you that money. You don't have to split it with them. And I was like, okay. I'm just so stupid on so many levels. But so I have sex with this guy. And then I called off. I called him and I was like, hey, like, I need to go home for a minute. And they were like, okay. And I went back to my house and I remember I made myself spaghetti and I just kept waiting because in Pretty Woman, she talked about the first time that she had sex for money, she cried and just like bawled. And so I was like, what if I have a delayed reaction?
So that's that stigma at play, is that it's supposed to be a negative thing. And you were like, this was a happy occasion for you.
Yeah, I was just like, okay, well, I'm gonna hedge my bets on this one. I'm gonna go home. But after a couple hours, like, I'm fine. I went back to work, and that was my beginning as an escort. And that was August 28th, 1996. For years, I celebrated my hoiversary. I would have, I would get like, it was always great. I would call like Baskin Robbins, and I'd be like, I want an ice cream cake, and I want it to say Happy Hoiversary.
Did they give it to you?
Yeah. And I would get my friends over. We would watch like, hooker themed movies. We would watch Best Little Whorehouse in Texas and, like just make a night out of it. Like I was always very open. All my friends knew. My family knew. My boyfriends knew. Yeah.
So you had boyfriends, or period. I mean, you had partners during this time. Was this a thing that they were cool with? Did they struggle with this? I mean, how did that go?
Yeah, there was definitely struggle. They knew before they got with me. I never lied to them about it. I would lie to them on occasionally about things that happened or didn't happen or whatever. But they knew what I did. Most of my friends, their boyfriends did not know. They thought that we were just going in and modeling lingerie, but I was always I didn't feel like it was fair, so I was always very open, and it caused a lot of grief. Like I have a theory that it takes men about 2 months to actually fall in love with someone, because they would be fine with it until the 2-month mark, and then they would break up with me, and then we would end up getting back together. But yeah, so it was really hard. And in my mind at the time, I was like, they're men. They're trying to control me. I'm a woman. It's my body. I'll do what I want. But now, like, I have a better understanding of men. And I understand that, when a man really cares about a woman, he really feels like it's his duty to protect her. And here I was stepping out, and I wouldn't let them protect me. And so I understand in a new way. Like, I wasn't dating controlling people. Like, they were just honest to God terrified for me, and, even if I didn't get killed, like they didn't, they knew that there were close calls and craziness that happened, and they didn't want me to go through that. And I was very cavalier. I was very much an asshole about it. I've actually had to make amends for it.
Well, before we get into some of those stories, let's pause, and if you wouldn't mind shouting out where people can find you online, where they can follow you, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I have heatherwylde.com. Wylde is Wylde. Best place to find me right now is Facebook, and I'm Heather Wylde Coach, all one word, on Facebook. And I've got an IG. You can follow me over there. It's also at Heather Wylde Coach.
I am so excited to tell you about my new CBD sponsor, Roadrunner. Y'all know I loved my old CBD sponsor, and I switched for one main reason. This stuff works. I've been a runner my whole life, but unfortunately I'm also super easily injured. One of my high school friends used to call me Mr. Glass. And back in 2015, when I ran my first half marathon, I got hurt, like really hurt. And since then, I haven't been able to run more than 3 or 4 miles without serious pain. That is, until I tried Roadrunner CBD's Muscle Gel. In a few short months, I'm regularly running 5.5 to 6 miles each outing, and I'm currently training for my next half marathon. I don't want to call it a miracle cure, but it's damn near close. So check it out at my personal Roadrunner link, which is roadrunnercbd.com/ref/CYS. Again, that's roadrunnercbd.com/ref/CYS, or at the link in my show notes or on my podcast website, and use the code CYS at checkout to get 10% off on all of their awesome products. Check it out today. Find me on social media. Check the link in the show notes or search for me, Jay Shifman, on YouTube and LinkedIn, and Choose Your Struggle on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Awesome. So now, you know, we could probably spend hours with you just telling funny stories. In fact, I know you can, because that's what A Day in the Life was. So again, everybody go check that out. But, you know, I think the most important thing we can do here is dispelling the myths that, you know, all sex work is violent, that it's all, you know, you have told me that you had, you know, you were in this for a good amount of time, and you said obviously there were some bad experiences, but you also had a lot of good experiences too.
I did. I had a lot of adventures. We call them adventures, escapades, and fiascos.
That's the title of your book, by the way. Once you put it out, that's the title of your book.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. So, you know, I had a sugar daddy that I very much liked a lot. He was a really, really sweet guy, and he you know, spoiled me quite a bit for about 9 months. I got to be on TV. I was on the local news a couple of times being interviewed about sex workers' rights, and I was on an ABC documentary called Sex, Drugs, and Consenting Adults. And I was also heavily featured in an MTV documentary called Sex 2K Escorts. So got some media exposure and some speaking engagements out of that. You know, I met some really, really nice people. Most people were really nice, and they were like they didn't make for good stories, right? Because it was just, I went in and they told me what they wanted. We negotiated a price. They had fun. I left, you know. And I shared with you, one of my favorite things was when people would say that I brightened their day, you know. And yeah. So I don't know, like you're gonna have to kind of jar my brain, like with specific stuff.
You know, but that is such a wonderful response, because, you know, sex work, I think, is one of those things that we see differently than as just a job. And it's, you know, a lot of the time, yeah, you were doing for a job a thing that a lot of people, there's a lot of stigma around, but also there were a lot of it that this was a job. This was your job. And everybody has good parts of their job. Everybody has bad parts. And sometimes it's just a job.
Yeah, very much so. And that was the hardest thing to try to explain to people, you know, especially to the boyfriends, you know, and I'm like, look, I'm going to work. Right. Like, this is no different. Like, I dated a guy that was a hairstylist. I'm like, this is no different. I feel no differently about this than you do somebody coming in and sitting down in your chair and getting their hair styled. You know, it's my job, you know. But that was something very, very difficult for a lot of people to understand. And I get that. And, you know, I'll say this, like I can have very intimate sex with a partner, and it can be a completely different thing than how I felt at work, you know, because at work, what is it? One of my mentors told me, she said, treat every client, like, be nice to them, but treat them all like they're homicidal cops with herpes and AIDS, and you'll be okay.
Okay. That is so oddly specific.
Well, the basic thing was she's like, no matter what's going on and how charming they are, realize that it could be a sting, so watch what you say. And no matter how charming and nice they are, realize that there could be a hypodermic needle under a pillow that they're going to slam into your neck while you're riding them. You may wake up dead. And then, as far as like the safer sex, it's like you just realize that no matter how charming they are, they may be very aware that they have an incurable STD that they're trying to pass on, in this act of vengeance. And, just be aware of it and be cautious and use your condoms. Go wash your pussy afterward.
So this actually, weird transition, I know, but this reminds me of something that I loved from your day in the life. Okay. You told me that there is actually a coaching school for people in that line of work, and I think this is a great transition from that career to the one you're doing now. So kind of talk a little bit about on the waning moments of your career in sex work to what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I loved it. It was my main income source for 16 years. And, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of adventure. I brightened a lot of people's days, which I felt really good about. I taught people, things about sex that they could go home and take to their partners. I felt really good about it. And then the internet really became a thing. And it gave rise to these review boards. And these review boards started controlling what we did and how we did it and what we could charge for it. So suddenly it was a lot harder to make money if you were a safety girl, which I very much was. And, whereas I had been brought up to be a very cautious criminal and not talk blatantly about stuff on the phone or in emails or whatever, it became very common to get these really nasty emails. And one of them that it was one of the final nails in the coffin. This guy sent me a thing, and he was like, if I give you $500, can I go balls deep raw in that ass? If you're not interested, just don't reply. I was like, oh.
None of the pretty woman romance in that email. Not Richard Gere.
Definitely not Richard Gere. But it was like, okay, if I reply to this and I say anything and I show up and it's a cop, they can arrest me at the door. Like, I don't even have to do anything. Like, for another thing, are you $500? Are you kidding me? Another thing, like, raw, what's wrong with these people? But it became very this hive mind thing, and they decided that heterosexual AIDS was a myth, and it was just really fucking weird, really toxic. And I started, I remember I had this nightmare that I had been talking to my roommate in this dream, and I was telling him about how I'd really gotten pissed off and I had killed a client. And in talking to him about killing this client in this dream, it was like I started remembering where I had blacked out and actually killed several other people. And I woke up from that dream and I'm like, okay, I'm dreaming about killing clients. I should probably get out. Like,
that's a good sign.
Yeah, like, I got to get out. And so, but it was really scary because escorting had become like, it wasn't just a job. It was an adventure. It was my entire identity. I didn't know who I was, without it. And it's scary, when you've done something for so long and it's become your identity, it's very scary to walk away, even when you're not happy doing it anymore. So, so I was at a loss, and I was in recovery by then. I didn't have a drug problem when I came into the industry, but I developed one while I was in it. I think that would have happened even if I had been, even if I'd gotten a college degree, whatever. I think I was destined to be a drug addict, which was a good thing because going through recovery is what actually started to heal my depression and anxiety and make me a happier person. It was like my first personal growth at work. But I kind of flailed around for a few years, and a friend took me to see a speaker at his college, and the woman was a career coach. And I went up and I talked to her afterwards, and I was like, hey, I would like to, be a client. And she was great. Like, she's like, well, what do you do now? And I'm like, well, I'm an escort. And she didn't miss a beat. You know, she's used to dealing with like Emory College students, and here I am, you know. And she's like, well, what do you like about it? And I'm like, well, I like that I'm my own boss. I like that I'm helping people. You know, I like the money. She's like, what don't you like about it? And I'm like, well, I'm sick of worrying about going to jail and, you know, all the nonsense. And after a few sessions and a personality test, she was like, you can't work for corporate America. Not you shouldn't, you can't. I was like, okay. But, you know, we started talking about coaching, and she was like, I think that would be a really good fit for you. So went to my first coaching school, and then I had to find a niche. And I was like, I don't know. And for a while I was like, okay, I just want to totally like I just want to let go of everything from my sex work path. And I realized that earlier this year, where I'd really taken that part of me and kind of just shoved it in a closet. Like, even though I would talk about it with people, like I had really like disowned everything that had been like thug Heather, you know, everything that had been escort Heather. And which wasn't fair. There were great things. There were things that needed to die, but there were some good things too. But I was really like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. You know, I just want to move on with my life. But after a while, I was like, well, I know a lot about sex. I could probably help people, you know, with coaching. Is there sex coaching? And, you know, did a search and found Sex Coach Institute was what it was called then. I'm not sure what it's called now. But they were out of course, Southern California. It was an online school. And I contacted them and I was like, yeah, I've been in sex work. I think I've probably been in sex work like 11 years at that point. And they're like, yeah, so we have a level 1 and level 2. I think we're just going to bump you up to level 2. And I was like, yeah, I think that's, you know, probably fair. And so I didn't finish my certification with them. Even the level 2 stuff was a little basic for me. And so it wasn't, but I mean, it was great material, you know, but like, I think we talked about this in my last thing too, was that one of the things you had to actually fly out to California is to be certified in this sexual attitudes readjustment thing. And it was like a weekend, and, you know, people from all over the world came for this, you know, program. And what they did was they showed you all this different type of porn, all these different types of porn, because other people have not been as exposed to things as I have. And so they didn't know about, you know, foot fetishes and BDSM and some transgender issues. And it was really interesting because me, another super high-end escort, well, okay, let me back down. I was never a super high-end escort. She was a super high-end escort. I was like middle of the road. And then Jessica Drake from Wicked Pictures were all in this class. And as we're watching this, all this different porn, you know, over the course of this weekend, we're kind of like looking at each other like, yeah, I've done that. No, my friend called me while she was doing that, you know, oh, I'm planning on doing that with my man next weekend, you know, but so many people were like, oh my gosh, I've never seen gay porn. And I'm like, what kind of rock do you live under? You know, so it was very interesting to me to see like, wow, I really have been exposed to a lot, which makes sense. But yeah, I mean, it's a really good program. It just wasn't really what I wanted to do. I did sex coaching for a few years, and I'll probably incorporate that like some later. But what I'm really interested in is like transformation. And one of the reasons why I still talk about my past as an escort, even though, you know, I don't do that anymore, you know, is because I want people to know that your past doesn't define you. You know, I did a lot of work on myself, and today I'm able to, you know, look back on that and not have shame about it, but not let it hold me back either, you know. And that was something that was really hard for me when I was first getting into the coaching industry, and all these people were telling their success stories, and they're like, yeah, you know, I worked in corporate America for so long, and then I got sick of it and I became an entrepreneur. And nobody was saying, you know, well, I used to be a hooker and now I'm an entrepreneur. Now I'm a coach. Although in sharing my story, I've had people reach out to me and be like, yeah, actually, you know, I actually worked as a stripper for a really long time, you know, but a lot of people don't talk about that. So I talk about it so that people know that they're not alone, you know, and that they know that you don't have to be ashamed of it, and you don't have to talk about it like I do. But mostly you don't have to let it define you, and you don't have to let any trauma from your life, define you.
Well, that's what I love so much about what you're doing and sort of this just the person that you are. When we got connected, I was like, all right, like, I don't think you were straight up, like, the first thing you said was the sex work. We got connected because of your path into recovery. And then you were pretty open about it. I was like, all right, like, clearly this is a person who definitely shares my fuck stigma mantra. And since then, I really appreciate just how open and forthright you've been. And I gotta feel like that people who are going to work with you as a coach are going to get the benefit of that. So if you wouldn't mind, sort of talk a little bit briefly about what it is, what is the perfect client for you? Who is someone that should reach out to you for coaching work?
So my big thing is I want to work with entrepreneurs who have a bigger mission, right? There's something that they feel, they have a purpose in this world, and it can be a part of their coaching thing, or it could be something that their coaching or their healing work is a stepping stone to. Like for me, it's very much my purpose and mission to help people transform, help them build lives of freedom, and being an entrepreneur is the best fucking way to do that, in my opinion. So I help them get freedom from their emotional traumas and from their past, and also help them build a business based on their own standards, values, and desires, so that they can, feel truly free and live truly free. And I kind of lost my train of thought. Where was I going with? Okay, so perfect client. Okay, so, I very much believe that you can make a whole lot of money and still be good to people. I don't believe that those two things are mutually exclusive. And so people that work with me are wanting to find ways of marketing and selling that feel good. Because unfortunately, most of what I've seen in the coaching industry from, I've taken 5 big business courses, most of the way that we're taught to sell is kind of sociopathic. It's kind of icky. There's a lot of manipulation and negging, and there's some gross stuff out there. And so that's one of the things I'm an expert in, is teaching people how to sell in a way that feels really good to them and still gets them clients. But yeah, it's people with a bigger mission. There's something that there's a change they're really wanting to see in the world. They're ambitious. They want to make a lot of money, but we're the type of people that you could throw us $1 million, but if the people that we got that money from weren't getting anything from it, we would be like, here's the money back, right? So yeah, it's my people are people that recognize that you have this big vision, and the people that we are that can have the big vision are not the people who can actually live that big vision. So there's a lot of personal transformation that goes along with chasing a big goal, whether it's getting sober or building a business or running a marathon or whatever. If you really want to have like massive personal growth, go after a nearly impossible dream. Like, it will pull you the fuck along. I'm sure Jay can relate to that.
Yes, very, very much. And I think that, obviously it is easy to see a scenario where you a different person, because not you, but a person with that path would let that limit them, but you have zero interest in letting that be the case. And so I can definitely say, if you are looking for an awesome coach, I've worked with coaches in the past and they make such a big difference. Obviously, I talk about my business coach, Kristen Zava, who is a big reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now. So definitely cannot say enough about working with a good coach. As someone who is certified as a coach myself, there is a lot of positivity there. And so I can say, if you're listening and Heather sounds like someone that you would like to work with, I think you should give it a try. So that is, I think, the best transition we can get into you shouting out where people can find you one more time if they're interested in working with you.
Yeah, so the best place is I'm on Facebook a lot. So facebook.com/Heather Wylde Coach. I do have a website, heatherwylde.com, but it's kind of in a transition period right now. You can also find me on IG, reach out in the messages and, just say, hey. And I only take people. I won't even pitch to you if I don't think if I don't think you're in a place that you're going to get great results working with me, I won't even pitch to you. So you never have to worry about being like strong armed or anything. It's not my jam.
Well, I love it, and definitely recommend reaching out to Heather. At the very least, you'll hear some entertaining stories. So before we sign off, we always have the same two questions. So number one, what self-care habits work for Heather?
I have to be able to zone out, and I do a lot of reading, and no surprise, I read a lot of smut. I read a lot of paranormal romance novels in the bathtub. Yeah.
That is the first time that paranormal smut has ever been said on the Choose Your Struggle podcast. I wish I had a buzzer, or a gong that whenever something was said for the first time, I could hit it, because, during a day in the life and now during this interview, you're breaking a lot of those firsts. Paranormal smut. There is the first time that's been mentioned on the Choose Your Struggle podcast.
Vampire sex is hot. What can I say?
I don't agree, but you know what? Whatever you're into, that is definitely the message of the Choose Your Struggle podcast. Do what you are into, and if that is vampire sex, then do your thing. Anything other than paranormal smut that we should know about your self-care habits, Heather?
I do bouncy aerobics. I do Kangoo workouts. So you've got these shoes that make you bounce, and it's just really good for your lymphatic system, and it's fun. You're like, I'm bouncing, I'm not exercising.
That does sound like fun. All right, so last question. We've now spent the last almost an hour hearing why you're amazing. We should all be checking you out and following you online. But who are a couple people that you follow? What are you listening to? What are you reading? Anything that you want to shout out?
Wow. Okay. So, my business coach is Amanda Rose. She's amazing, super ethical, multi-passionate entrepreneur. Her copy is highly entertaining. I mean, you follow her just for the entertainment, but she's amazing. Lauren Najar was my first business coach ever, and she's really amazing. Lots of great content that she puts out. What I'm reading, God, I mean, it sounds, I guess my life kind of does revolve around sex. Jesus. I'm reading a book called Existential Kink, and it's all about how if you've got something in your life, especially if it's patterns of things that you say you don't want, that there's basically your shadow side is getting off on it. And so you have to learn to get off on it so that you can let it go.
That is super fascinating. I've not heard of that before.
Gong.
Yeah, seriously, another gong, but very different gong moment. That's very interesting. I'd not heard of that theory before.
Yeah, it's a good book. It's hard to swallow, but yeah, I found out that I'm a kinky little monkey, Jay.
You know what? That's it. We're going to finish on that. We can't have a better way to finish this show than Heather saying she's a kink. That's fine. That is going to be... in fact, I'm going to cut all of this, and that would be really weird if the last few minutes on the show was just Heather saying that, and then it just went silent. That would be fantastic. Well,
my shadow side is interested in some weird shit, and we're trying to get on the same page, and it's going to be all right.
Well, as a guest who I had last season, Janelle Vital, who's a sex and something coach, intimacy coach, I think that's what her title is. As she talked about, fantasies are there's nothing wrong with it. That is you learning something about yourself, and as long as the things that maybe aren't as okay, you don't act on, then having the fantasy is just you're not choosing to do that. It's your subconscious talking to you, and sometimes it's coming from a place that's unhealthy and that a good therapist can work with you on, and sometimes it's just your subconscious saying to you, this is something that maybe you should think about a little bit.
Yeah, that's about 3 months worth of shows right there.
Well, you'll have to save it for a day in the life too. I'll bring you back for that one. Heather, thank you so much for coming in today. This is fantastic, and I'm sure the listeners are going to enjoy it.
I appreciate you, Jay. This is fun as always. Thanks everybody who listened. Follow Jay, subscribe to the podcast. He's fucking awesome.
Y'all know I love to read, and almost every episode of this podcast includes a recommendation to check out an awesome book. From Adi Jaffe's abstinence myth to Johann Hari's Chasing the Scream, I'm constantly looking for new books to learn from and enjoy. That's why I'm super excited to partner with Bookshop. Bookshop is a wonderful website that helps you find all your favorite books and support your local neighborhood bookstore in the process. I've bought everything from textbooks to Star Wars novels on Bookshop, and I've supported my local store with each transaction. Best of all, my Bookshop link will allow you to see all the books I've mentioned on the show right in one spot. So check out Bookshop today using the link in my show notes, or go to bookshop.org/shop/CYS, and you'll find all the awesome books you want and support the podcast in the process. Check it out today. Subscribe to my Patreon for behind-the-scenes looks at the podcast, sneak peeks, and bonus data. You'll also get a discount on Choose Your Struggle merch. Find it at patreon.com/chooseyourstruggle.
All right, we've come to the end of another episode of the Choose Your Struggle podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Heather. I just think it's so interesting. And what's so important to me, not only was it a funny episode, one that I laughed a lot at, but like I think the best episodes of the show, it challenged a lot of preconceived misconceptions. As Heather and I talk about, is there a reality that people get into sex work in really scary and sad ways? Of course it is. People also get into other lines of work in really scary and sad ways. But as Heather talks about in this, it's not the end all be all. And in fact, it kind of, the extremes are what we know, and not the average story like Heather's, where people who choose this because they like it, because they're good at it. It's a job, and that's something that I talk about a lot around my story is in struggling with substance misuse and addiction, is that, this was the point of the TED Talk kind of, was that we only get shown the extreme far end of the spectrum, right? I mean, what if every person who is struggling with cancer, we only knew the person like in the final weeks of their life? That would be a really incorrect glimpse of the entire spectrum of people who struggle with cancer. Well, we get that with a lot of things. We get that with addiction all the time, but we definitely get that with sex work. And I really appreciate Heather dispelling some of those myths. All right, your card for today is going to be from one of the Blurt card packs, the Nuggets of Kindness card packs, Nuggets of Kindness. So thank you, Blurt. This is your card. Love yourself unconditionally, just as you love those closest to you despite their faults. And that was said by Les Brown. If we did that one before, my apologies. I don't think so, but I know we've used something from Les Brown before. So thank you to Les. Thank you. That card is great. That is something that, I talk about a lot. I was interviewed on that not long ago, where I said, when it comes to imposter syndrome, one of the great ways to measure that, or to test that, I think it's a better word to say there, is if you wouldn't say it to your best friend, you shouldn't say it to yourself. Now, you may have a friendship where you call the person out on their BS, and that's beautiful. But also you would do it in a nice way. And you would say, look, it's definitely normal to feel that way. Here's where I think you're missing, or here's where I think it isn't right. Do that with yourself. Don't hold yourself to higher standards. Are you amazing? Hell yeah, you're amazing. You are awesome. Also, you're still a person and you make mistakes, and you do some things less than perfect. So definitely it's okay to recognize your shortcomings. It's okay to be honest with yourself, but do it in a kind way. Do it in an accepting way. That's a great card. Now, that's going to go into your good egg for this week. It is so hot. I mean, I don't know where you live. Obviously, you live all over. Thank you, listeners. I love you. But here, where in the U.S. at least, it is so hot. It is scary hot. I mean, if you didn't think climate change is real, I don't know what to tell you. I saw a stat the other day that the Seattle area, it was a certain part of Seattle, has had only 5 days over 100 degrees since 1990. 3 of them were the last 3 days. I mean, that is how hot it is right now. Here in Philly, it's supposed to, as I'm recording this, it's supposed to be 95 degrees today with the heat index. It's going to be closer to 105. That's not normal for this area. It is hot. So what happens when people are hot? Their tempers are shorter. They are quick to, I think, treat others more harshly. Obviously, we've seen stats that say that, sort of certain types of crime go up in the summer. Now, part of that is that people are out of their homes, obviously, but also we as humans do not do well when we are really hot. So your good egg this week is to give someone the benefit of the doubt. If someone does something to upset you, try to be, and look, this goes both ways. You're going to be quicker to judge. They're going to be quicker to be angry, but try to be the no pun intended, cooler one in the situation. Okay, that pun was intended. But just give them the benefit of the doubt. Remember that if you're hot, they're hot, you're all hot. We are all struggling with this. So try to let calmer heads prevail. But most importantly, always the most important is to be vulnerable, show your empathy, spread your love, and choose your struggle.